everyone, and welcome back to the Insight Room, where we understand the mind one insight at a time. Before we begin, this video is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not medical or psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Mental health is complex, individual experiences vary, and if you are concerned about your mental health, I encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare professional. If you've ever owned a dog, you've probably heard someone say, "He's not just a dog." And if you're a dog owner yourself, you probably know exactly what they mean. Dogs sleep next to us, walk beside us, comfort us when we're struggling, celebrate when we come home, and somehow become woven into our daily routines and emotional lives in ways that can be surprisingly difficult to explain. But is there actually science behind this? Can dogs genuinely improve mental health? Can they reduce anxiety? Can they help with depression, reduce loneliness, or are we simply projecting human emotions onto our pets? There is research behind this. In fact, one article notes that approximately one-third of Canadian and US households own a dog, and researchers have spent decades studying whether dogs affect our mental, physical, and social well-being. Increasingly, the answer appears to be yes, but with some important nuance. Today, we're going to look at what psychology and neuroscience tells us about the human-dog bond, why dogs seem to have such a powerful impact on so many people, and what they may actually be doing to our brains and mental health. Start with stress. One of the most consistent findings in the research is that interacting with dogs appears to reduce stress responses. Researchers have found that spending time with dogs is associated with lower cortisol levels, which is one of the body's primary stress hormones. Interaction with dogs has also been linked with increases in serotonin and dopamine, the neurotransmitters associated with pleasure, reward, and emotional well-being. In simple terms, dogs appear to influence some of the same biological systems involved in stress regulation and positive emotional experiences. One article described a study involving 47 boys between the ages of 7 and 11 who completed a stressful laboratory task. The children who had a therapy dog present showed significantly lower salivary cortisol levels, especially during the recovery period, compared to other conditions. That does not mean that every stressful situation is solved by a dog, but it does suggest that dogs may help some people regulate physiologically after stress. Another study looked at adults after a stress-inducing task. The researchers compared people who spent 10 minutes interacting with their own dog, people who used a stress-reducing coloring book, and people who simply waited. The people who interacted with their own dogs showed greater increases in positive affect and greater reductions in anxiety than both control groups. That finding is important because it suggests the benefit was not just because people expected to feel better. The dog interaction appeared to do something more than another activity that was also presented as stress reducing. Now, that does not mean dogs magically cure stress. You can absolutely be stressed and own a dog. You can have anxiety and own a dog. You can have depression and own a dog. But many people report that interacting with their dog helps them recover from stress more quickly. So, think about what happens after a difficult day. You walk through the door and your dog is excited to see you. They're not evaluating you. They're not criticizing you. They're not asking whether you were productive enough at work today. They're not reminding you about a mistake that you made last week. They're just happy that you're home. That kind of interaction may sound simple, but psychologically, it can be incredibly regulating. And for many people, it becomes a reliable source of comfort during difficult periods in their life. Now, let's talk about the oxytocin connection. To understand why dogs affect us so strongly, we need to talk about oxytocin. So, oxytocin is sometimes called the bonding hormone. It's involved in attachment, trust, caregiving, social connection, and emotional bonding. Research suggests that interactions between dogs and their owners may increase oxytocin in both the human and the dog. Physical touch appears to play a role. Petting appears to play a role. Even mutual eye contact appears to play a role. One review described oxytocin as a key possible mechanism in many of the psychological and physiological effects of human animal interaction. The idea is that interacting with a bonded animal may activate affiliative systems in the brain and body. Those are the same broad systems involved in connection, soothing, attachment, and social safety. What's fascinating is that this creates something resembling a biological feedback loop. You enjoy interacting with your dog enjoys interacting with you. Both of you may experience physiological changes associated with bonding and connection. In other words, the relationship is not one sided, it's reciprocal. Many people describe their dogs as family members. While dogs obviously are not humans, the attachment bond that develops can be remarkably powerful. From a psychological perspective, attachment relationships provide safety, comfort, predictability, and emotional regulation. Dogs often provide all four. One of the strongest findings in the literature involves loneliness. Several studies have found associations between dog ownership and reductions in loneliness and social isolation. One study summarized in the literature found that pet owners were about twice less likely than non owners to report frequently feeling lonely. Another line of research found that pets can fulfill social needs in a way that complements human relationships rather than replacing them. And that distinction matters. Dogs do not replace human connection. They are not substitute for friendships, family relationships, romantic relationships, or community. But they can provide companionship, consistency, and emotional presence in one's life. For people who live alone, work remotely, are retired, have recently relocated, or are struggling with social isolation, that companionship can become incredibly meaningful. One longitudinal pilot study followed adults with serious mental illness who received emotional support animals. After 12 months, participants showed statistically significant decreases in loneliness, depression, and anxiety scores. The sample was small, so we should not overgeneralize from it, but the pattern still is clinically interesting. The qualitative part of that study was also meaningful. Participants described their animals as helping them get up, helping them leave the house, helping them feel comforted, and giving them more moments during the day where they were smiling. Humans are social creatures. We evolved in groups. We need connection. A dog may not fully meet that need, but it can provide a meaningful sense of companionship and emotional connection. A dog may not eliminate loneliness, but it can reduce the experience of being alone. And those are not exactly the same thing. In my opinion, one of the most important psychological benefits of dog receives surprisingly little attention: behavioral activation. Behavioral activation is a concept frequently used in the treatment of depression. The basic idea is straightforward. When people become depressed, they often withdraw. They stop doing activities. They stop leaving the house. They stop exercising. They stop engaging with life in general. Unfortunately, that withdrawal often worsens depression. Dogs naturally push against that pattern. Dogs need food, dogs need water, dogs need exercise, dogs need attention, and dogs need routine. Whether you're motivated or not, your dog still needs to go outside. Whether you're having a good day or a bad day, your dog still wants a walk. Whether you feel like getting out of bed or not, your dog still needs care. Because of that, many people continue engaging with life even when they're struggling psychologically. In the emotional support animal study, behavioral activation and motivation were major themes. Participants described their animals as giving them something to get up for, getting them out the door, and helping them do things they could not just do for themselves. As a therapist, I think this may be one of the most clinically meaningful benefits dogs provide. Not because they remove depression, but because they often create conditions that make recovery more likely. Sometimes the benefit is not dramatic, sometimes it is very practical. You got out of bed, you fed another living creature, you went outside, you moved your body around, you had a brief social interaction, you maintained a routine. Those things may sound small, but in depression treatment, they are not small. They are often the foundation of recovery. Dogs don't just affect our relationship with ourselves, they also affect our relationships with other people. Researchers often describe dogs as social facilitators or social catalysts. Think about a typical walk. Without a dog, many people pass each other without saying a word. With a dog, people smile, they ask questions, they comment on the breed, they share stories about their own pets, they stop and talk with people. Dogs essentially create those opportunities for social interaction that otherwise might never occur. One article described dog ownership as supporting social connection and community engagement. Dogs can become a shared topic, a reason to leave the house, and a bridge between people who otherwise might not interact. Many dog owners have experienced this firsthand. You meet neighbors, you recognize familiar faces, you start conversations, you join walking groups, you visit dog parks, you become part of a small community. For people with social anxiety or limited social networks, these interactions can be particularly meaningful. Not because a dog instantly cures social anxiety, but because dogs often make social interactions feel easier, more natural, and less intimidating. Sometimes a dog becomes a bridge between people who otherwise would never have spoken. Another recurring theme in both the research and people's lived experiences is purpose. Many dog owners describe feeling needed, responsible for another living creature, part of something larger than themselves. That may sound simple, but it psychologically matters. Meaning and purpose are strongly associated with psychological well being. When people feel connected to something beyond themselves, they often experience greater resilience during difficult periods of their life. One study of 220 dog owners found that 69.5% strongly agreed that their dog helped them get through difficult times. In that same study, 70.9% strongly agreed that their dog was there to comfort them, and 79% strongly agreed that their dog provided constant companionship. As a dog owner myself, those numbers don't really surprise me. Dogs create countless opportunities to experience purpose. You matter to your dog. You are their caregiver, their source of safety, their source of food, their source of comfort, their favorite walking partner, their family. That relationship creates responsibility, but it also creates meaning. And meaning is often protective when life becomes difficult. Though today's focus is mental health, we should briefly discuss physical health because the two are closely connected. Dogs encourage movement, walking, hiking, playing, spending time outdoors. In one study of dog owners, 77.3% reported walking their dogs. About 33.6% tried to walk their dogs every day. And even those who did not walk daily averaged about 4 to 5 walks per week. The same study found that 26.8% of respondents exercised with their dog. That may not sound like psychology, but it absolutely is. Physical activity is associated with improved mood, reduced anxiety symptoms, better sleep, and improved overall physical psychological well-being. So, some of the psychological benefits associated with dogs may occur indirectly. Dogs encourage activity, and activity improves mental health. In that sense, dogs can become powerful partners in maintaining healthy habits. Sometimes one of the biggest mental health benefits of a dog is not what happens when you're petting them on the couch. It's the fact that they convince you to get off the couch in the first place. At this point, I should probably introduce the dog that occasionally appears in the background of this channel. This is Huckleberry. Huckleberry is my golden retriever, therapy dog, and constant companion. I've had her for about 4.5 years, and she's coming up on her fifth birthday soon here in September. If you've watched some of my videos, you know that I always have a golden retriever in my thumbnail, and that is not a mistake. Huckleberry is a huge part of my daily life. When I'm working in my office and there aren't clients around, she's usually right there with me. Sometimes she's sleeping, sometimes she's watching what's going on outside, and sometimes she's making sure I'm paying attention to her instead of whatever I'm working on. She's very calm, extremely social, very sensitive to people, and honestly a little clingy. If I'm moving from one room to another, there's a really good chance she's following me within a couple feet. What I've always found interesting is how naturally she seems to read people. When clients are in the office, she has three different things that she's trained to do. She can lie on a client's feet, lie across a client's lap, if appropriate and requested, or go lie quietly in the corner on her dog bed. What's interesting is how different people respond to those options. Some people want her right next to them on their lap. Some people want a little interaction at the beginning of a session, and then she's content to lie in the corner. Some people don't interact with her much at all. But over the years, I've watched anxious clients relax. I've watched children become more comfortable. I've watched people who seem guarded or nervous start smiling because a golden retriever just walked into the room carrying a toy. And speaking of toys, Huckleberry's current favorite toy is a yellow and blue dinosaur. If I'm editing this correctly, you're probably looking at it right now on the screen. Like many dog owners, I've probably spent an embarrassing amount of money on dog toys, and somehow the dinosaur is the one that won. So I also think Huckleberry demonstrates many of the points we've been discussing throughout this video. She creates some routine, she gets me outside, she introduces me to people I otherwise never would have met. She provides companionship, and she adds structure to my life in ways that are easy to overlook until I stop and think about them. The research language for this is stress regulation, attachment, social facilitation, behavioral activation, and meaning. But in everyday language, many dog owners would just say, my dog helps me get through life. And that's not a small thing. I don't think dogs solve every problem, but I do think many dog owners recognize something in their own lives that the research is increasingly capturing. Life often feels a little easier, a little more connected, and a little more meaningful when a dog is part of it. Now, let's be balanced. Dogs are not a cure for mental illness. They are not therapy. They are not medication, and they are not right as a choice for everyone. It's also important to remember that a lot of this research shows associations and potential benefits. It does not mean dogs automatically improve mental health for everyone, and it certainly does not mean everyone should get a dog. Some studies are correlational, some have small samples, some rely heavily on self-report. Some include people who already like dogs, which means the findings may not apply to people who dislike dogs, fear dogs, are allergic to dogs, or do not want the responsibility of caring for one. Dogs require time, money, training, veterinary care, housing accommodations, daily commitment, and emotional investment. Research acknowledges that dog ownership can create stress, financial burden, caregiving responsibilities, and emotional hardship, especially when a pet becomes ill. And when dogs are used in therapy or support roles, their welfare matters too. One review emphasized that therapy dogs should be treated as tools. Their stress, comfort, health, autonomy, and well being need to be considered carefully. That matters to me clinically and personally. If a dog is going to support human well being, the dog's well being must matter as well. So, if you're struggling psychologically, getting a dog should never be viewed as a substitute for appropriate mental health treatment. But for many people, dogs can become an incredibly valuable source of support alongside treatment, relationships, healthy coping skills, and other aspects of recovery. So, what do dogs do to your brain and mental health? The research suggests they may help reduce stress, strengthen attachment, decrease loneliness, increase social connection, encourage healthy routines, promote physical activity, and create a greater sense of purpose. Not because they're magical, but because they engage many of the same psychological systems that help human beings thrive: connection, attachment, routine, meaning, and belonging. Sometimes that's exactly what we need. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Insight Room Psychology. And if you have a dog, let me know in the comments. What's one way your dog has improved your life? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.